I want you to imagine something that sounds wonderful on the surface but becomes dangerous very quickly if you do not understand the principles behind it. Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up and you are rich. Maybe an investment you own suddenly becomes worth far more than you expected. Maybe a business you built quietly starts producing real money. Maybe you receive a large inheritance. Maybe something unlikely happens, such as winning a lottery or receiving a windfall you never planned for. Most people think the hard part is getting the money. That is not how I see it. Getting money quickly is one kind of event. Keeping it is a completely different system. I have seen over and over again that when people receive money faster than they have developed the character, habits, structure, and decision-making system to manage it, the money does not solve their problems. It exposes them. It magnifies the weaknesses that were already there. It pulls pressure out of the future and drops it into the present all at once. And when that happens, the person does not just risk losing money. They risk losing privacy. They risk losing relationships. They risk losing judgment. They risk losing the quiet and ordinary life that made them stable in the first place. That is why the first principle is simple. When you get rich, tell no one. I know that sounds extreme. It sounds cold. It sounds like advice from someone who does not understand human excitement. But I understand human excitement very well. I also understand what excitement does to people when it is mixed with money and attention. Sudden wealth creates a new reality around you before you are ready to operate inside it. You may still feel like the same person. You may still be sitting at the same kitchen table, drinking the same coffee, wearing the same clothes, answering the same messages. But once other people know that your financial position has changed, they will no longer relate to you in the same way. Some will admire you. Some will envy you. Some will believe you owe them something. Some will start to calculate what they can get from you. Some will not even know they are changing, but they will change anyway. Money does not always change people in the way the public says it does. Very often, money reveals people. It reveals who has discipline and who has greed. It reveals who loves you and who sees you as an emergency fund. It reveals who respects boundaries and who only respected you when you were useful but not powerful. The most dangerous mistake is to announce your wealth before you have built a system around it. That is like building a house with no doors, no locks, no insurance, no plan, and then inviting the entire town to walk through it, a person who suddenly becomes rich and tells everyone has created a risk environment. They become easier to rob, easier to sue, easier to blackmail, easier to manipulate, easier to pressure, and easier to guilt. They become a target not because they are bad people, but because they have publicly signaled that they are liquid. Liquidity, that is a principle. There is a man named Jack Whitaker whose story has been told many times because it is such a painful example of what can happen when a windfall is not protected by structure. He won a huge Powerball jackpot, hundreds of millions of dollars. At the time, it was one of the largest jackpots ever won by a single ticket. At first, people saw him as generous. He gave money away. He helped churches. He bought things for friends. He did what many people imagined they would do if they suddenly became rich. He tried to use money to make people happy and to be seen as a good person. But money without boundaries often becomes chaos disguised as kindness. Over time, his public wealth brought pressure, dependency, family tragedy, lawsuits, attention, and destruction. Relationships broke down. His granddaughter, whom he had spoiled with money, died tragically. Later, he said that the very thing he thought would bless his family had helped destroy it. The lesson is not that generosity is bad. The lesson is that generosity without a system is dangerous. If you become rich quickly, your first job is not to impress people. It is not to reward everyone. It is not to prove that you have a good heart. Your first job is to protect the source of your future freedom from your own impulses and from other people's demands. That begins with privacy. You want to become what I call quietly wealthy, not flashy wealthy, not performative wealthy, not the person who needs the car, the watch, the house, the vacation photographs, the sudden public transformation, and the applause. You want to become quietly wealthy because quiet wealth gives you the most valuable thing money can buy, which is control over your own life. The only person you should speak to immediately is not your cousin, not your neighbor, not your coworkers, not your friends, and not social media. It is a competent attorney, not just any attorney. A good attorney who understands trusts, estate planning, asset protection, taxes, privacy, and how large sums of money should be handled before they become visible to the world. That is because sudden wealth is not just an amount of money. It is a legal event. It is a tax event. It is a family event. It is a behavioral event. And if you handle it casually, the world will handle you casually. A properly designed trust can create privacy. It can create order. It can help protect assets. It can reduce unnecessary taxes in certain situations. It can decide how money moves when you die. It can protect children from receiving too much too soon. It can create a system that makes decisions after the emotional excitement has faded. This is what most people do not understand. The purpose of wealth planning is not to make life more complicated. It is to make your future mistakes less expensive. The best time to build structure is before anyone knows you have the money. Once the world knows, every decision becomes louder. Every request becomes more emotional. Every no becomes a personal insult. Every yes becomes a precedent. That is why the structure must come before the announcement. In an ideal world, nobody ever needs the announcement. You do not owe people the story of your money. You owe yourself the responsibility of not destroying it. The next thing people often ask is whether they should quit their job. A lot of traditional advice says not to quit. I understand that advice. It comes from a good place. It is trying to prevent people from making a fast emotional decision. But I would state the principle a little differently. If your job is making you miserable and you now have the financial ability to leave, then you may quit that job, but do not quit being productive. That distinction matters enormously. A job and work are not the same thing. A job is one form of exchanging time for money inside someone else's system. Work is the act of directing your energy towards something meaningful, useful, and structured. People need work. They need purpose. They need rhythm. They need problems to solve. They need some reason to get up and move in a direction. When people suddenly become rich and quit everything, they often enter a dangerous empty space. They wake up with no schedule, no external pressure, no professional identity, and too much money available too easily. At first, it feels like freedom. Then boredom begins to creep in. Then boredom looks for stimulation. Stimulation becomes spending. Spending becomes a hobby. Then the person starts looking for bigger stimulation because ordinary life no longer feels intense enough. That is when they buy things they do not understand. They start businesses they have no competence in. They invest in friends' ideas. They buy restaurants, nightclubs, sports cars, speculative assets, and status symbols, not because those things are part of a clear plan, but because they are trying to fill a vacuum. Being rich and bored is a very dangerous condition. If you are working, you are not spending all day. If you are engaged in useful work, you are not constantly trying to create excitement from consumption. If you have a schedule, a purpose, and people who depend on your judgment, you are less likely to make wealth, destroying decisions just to feel alive. So if you receive sudden wealth, keep your life as normal as possible for a period of time. 6 months is a reasonable minimum. Do not make large, irreversible lifestyle decisions immediately. Do not buy the giant house immediately. Do not move cities immediately. Do not tell yourself that you have become a completely different person. Let the nervous system catch up with the balance sheet. That is a useful way to think about it. Your financial life may change in one day, but your habits, identity, discipline, fears, and desires do not change in one day. They need time to adjust. During that period, the best decision is usually to slow down, keep a routine, build the legal and financial structure, and observe your own impulses. You may decide to leave a job that drains you, that can be reasonable, but replace it with something constructive. Find work you enjoy. Volunteer. Learn, build something carefully, become more educated, spend time with people you respect. Use freedom to improve the quality of your life, not to escape all responsibility. The goal of wealth is not to remove all friction. A life with no friction often becomes weak. The goal is to choose the right friction. The next principle is to use wealth as a reset button, not as a permission slip. If you have high-interest debt, deal with it. People sometimes become rich and tell themselves, "I do not need to worry about debt anymore." That is a dangerous thought. Debt is not just a number. It is a claim on your future. High-interest debt is one of the most destructive forces in personal finance because it compounds against you. Credit cards charging 20-25 or 30% interest are not small problems just because your bank balance is larger. They are guaranteed leaks in the system. If you pay off a credit card charging 25%, that is economically similar to earning a risk-free 25% return because you have eliminated a guaranteed cost. There are very few investments in the world that offer a certain return like that. Car loans and personal loans should be looked at the same way. If the interest rate is high and the loan does not serve a strategic purpose, it should usually be cleared. It is unnecessary complexity. It is friction. It is a claim that reduces freedom. Mortgages are different. This is where people need to think more carefully. Many people who suddenly become rich want to pay off the house immediately because it feels emotionally clean. I understand that feeling. There is value in peace of mind, but not all debt is the same. If you have a mortgage at 2 or 3%, that may be cheap debt in an inflationary world, fixed low. Rate debt can even be an asset because you repay it with dollars that become less valuable over time. If you can invest money at a reasonable return above the mortgage rate, it may be better to keep the mortgage and deploy capital elsewhere. That does not mean everyone should keep a mortgage. Some people need the psychological benefit of being debt-free. Psychology matters. But the principle is to distinguish between destructive debt and strategic debt. High-interest consumer debt is usually destructive. Low-interest, fixed-rate, manageable debt attached to a useful asset may be strategic. The important point is not to act impulsively. Look at the rate, look at the opportunity cost, look at your emotional need for simplicity. Then decide. But do not let old debts sit around just because you are now rich enough to ignore them. Small leaks sink big ships when they are left unattended. The next principle is one of the hardest emotionally. Do not lend money to friends and family. That sentence will make some people uncomfortable because it sounds harsh. But if you have been around money long enough, you learn that lending money to people close to you often creates the worst possible combination of emotions. It mixes love, obligation, resentment, shame, entitlement, avoidance, and power into one relationship. If someone close to you asks for a loan, there is a good chance they are already under pressure. If you give them money with an expectation of repayment, you now become their creditor. Every dinner, every family gathering, every unanswered message, every purchase they make becomes emotionally charged. You start to wonder why they are buying a new phone if they owe you money. They start to avoid you because they feel judged. You become frustrated. They become defensive. The relationship changes. The fastest way to damage a friendship or family relationship is to turn it into a poorly documented private bank. That does not mean you should never help people. Help can be a beautiful thing when it is done with clarity. But if you decide to help someone, give the money, do not lend it, and give it with a boundary. The boundary might be that this is a one-time gift and they should not ask again. The boundary might be that you will help with a specific necessity, not with lifestyle. The boundary might be that you will pay a bill directly rather than handing over cash. The boundary might be that you will help them get advice, education, or a plan, not simply fund repeated emergencies. This is not cruelty. It is compassion with structure. If you become the emergency fund for everyone around you, you do not help them become stronger. You train them to depend on you. You also create a system in which their lack of planning becomes your recurring obligation. A person who knows you will always rescue them has less incentive to build discipline. That is how money can weaken people you love if it is given without principles. So before you receive the first request, create your rule, decide in advance what you will and will not do. Discuss it with your attorney or advisor if necessary, build it into your structure. Then when the emotional request comes, you do not need to make a fresh decision under pressure. You follow your rule. Rules are most valuable when emotions are high. The next principle is the one that separates people who stay rich from people who only visit wealth temporarily. Never spend the principal. Spend only what the principal produces. This sounds simple, but most people fail because they are still thinking like consumers. They see $5 million and think, what can I buy? They do not think, what system can this money create that will pay me forever? That difference determines everything. Principle is the tree, income is the fruit. If you cut down the tree to enjoy a big fire, you may feel warm for one night, but then the tree is gone. If you protect the tree, grow it, and harvest only the fruit, you can have warmth every year. This is how I think about capital. Capital is not money to be spent. Capital is a machine that produces choices. The more capital you preserve and invest wisely, the more choices you have. You can choose where to live. You can choose whether to work. You can choose how to spend your time. You can choose how much pressure to accept. You can choose whether to say yes or no. If you spend the capital, you spend the choices. There are many stories of people who received large sums of money and then lost them quickly because they skipped this principle. They bought the mansion first. They bought the sports cars. They upgraded every part of life at once. They put children into expensive schools, joined expensive clubs, built expensive habits, and assumed the money would last because the number felt large. But a large number can become small very quickly when the lifestyle expands faster than the income engine. The more expensive your life becomes, the more capital it takes to support it. This is why you need a freedom figure. Your freedom figure is the amount of invested capital required to support the life you want without destroying the principal. A simple way to think about it is the rule of 25. If you want $200,000 a year of income, multiply that by 25. That means you need $5 million invested to support that lifestyle using a 4% withdrawal rate. This is not a perfect rule. No rule is perfect. Markets change. Inflation changes. Taxes matter. Your age matters. Your risk tolerance matters. But the rule is useful because it forces you to think in terms of capital and income rather than spending and excitement. If you want $100,000 a year, the figure is about $2.5 million. If you want $300,000 a year, the figure is about $7.5 million. The discipline is hard. People often ask where they can get that kind of income. They say their bank account pays almost nothing or only a small interest rate. That is why a real wealth plan usually cannot rely only on an ordinary bank account. You need an investment system. But at the stage of sudden wealth, the primary goal should not be maximum growth. The primary goal should be survival, preservation, sensible growth, and income. If you have enough money to be free, the great danger is trying to become even richer so quickly that you stop being free. There is a principle I like when you have won the game. Stop playing as if you are still desperate. That does not mean stop investing. It means stop taking risks that are unnecessary to achieve your goals. Suppose someone receives $5 million. The question is not, how do I turn this into 50 million as fast as possible? The question is, what allocation gives me a high probability of maintaining freedom for the rest of my life? One part can go into a low-cost total stock market index fund that gives exposure to broad corporate productivity. You own pieces of many companies rather than betting on one. Over long periods, the stock market has historically rewarded patient capital, but it is volatile, it can fall. It can stay down longer than you expect. That is why stocks are the growth engine, not the entire machine. Another part can go into a broad bond market fund or other high-quality fixed income assets. Bonds are not exciting. They are not meant to be exciting. They create stability, income, and balance. When stocks are volatile, bonds can help reduce the emotional and financial pressure to sell at the wrong time. Another part can go into real estate. Real estate has two functions. It can produce income and it can act as a real asset in an inflationary world. Residential real estate can benefit from long-term housing demand. Commercial real estate can produce cash flow when bought correctly. But real estate is not passive in the way people imagine. It has tenants, repairs, taxes, insurance, financing, cycles, and execution risk. It must be managed like a business. Another part, for some people, may go into assets with more upside and more volatility, such as Bitcoin or Ethereum. This is not the stable foundation of the plan. It is a small allocation for asymmetric possibility. It can go up dramatically, and it can fall dramatically. It should never be large enough to threaten the overall system if it fails. Another part can sit in a high-yield savings account, treasury bills, or other very liquid reserves. This is not there to make you rich. It is there to keep you from being forced to sell good assets during bad markets. Liquidity is emotional oxygen. People underestimate that. If you have enough liquidity, you can wait. If you can wait, you can make better decisions. The exact percentages should depend on age, goals, taxes, risk tolerance, and professional advice. A young person with a long horizon may hold more growth assets. An older person who has already reached the freedom figure may hold more stability and income. A family with large future obligations may need more liquidity. A person with low spending needs may not need to take much risk at all. The point is not the perfect allocation. The point is that sudden wealth must become a portfolio, not a pile. A pile of money invites spending. A portfolio creates a system. A system produces income, growth, stability, liquidity, and optionality. That is the purpose. Then, once the system is secure, you can create a controlled amount of fun money. This is important because people are not machines. If you tell someone who suddenly becomes rich that they can enjoy none of it, they may eventually rebel against their own plan. So I believe in building a deliberate release valve. Take an amount that does not threaten the principal. Spend it on whatever gives real joy, travel experiences, a better home if it fits the plan. Something for the family, something meaningful. The key is that it is defined in advance. Fun money should be a container, not a leak. If the container is 5% or 10% of the windfall and the rest is protected, then enjoyment can happen without destroying freedom. But if every desire becomes negotiable, the entire fortune becomes exposed. The people who stay rich are not the ones who never enjoy money. They are the ones who know which money is for enjoyment and which money must never be touched. That brings me to a deeper point. Real wealth is not the ability to buy expensive things. Real wealth is the ability to control your time. A person who has and constant anxiety is not free. A person who has a modest house, a stable portfolio, low debt, privacy, and full control over their day may be far richer in the ways that matter. Do not confuse symbols of wealth with wealth itself. A Lamborghini is not freedom if it comes with pressure to maintain a lifestyle you do not need. A mansion is not freedom if it multiplies taxes, insurance, maintenance, staff, repairs, and social expectations. Luxury is enjoyable when it is bought from surplus. It becomes a trap when it becomes identity. The purpose of money is not to impress people who are not paying your bills and will not carry your stress. The purpose of money is to increase your ability to live according to your values. That is why the first few months after sudden wealth are so important. During those months, you are deciding whether money will become a tool or a master. If you move slowly, stay private, hire the right professionals, clear destructive debt, set boundaries, protect principal, build a portfolio, and define your freedom figure, the money can become a source of stability. If you move quickly, announce it, upgrade everything, fund everyone, start random businesses, chase status, and spend the principal, the money can become a curse. The difference is not luck, the difference is principles. Let me make the system very clear. First, protect privacy. Do not announce, do not signal. Do not let your ego turn your wealth into a public event. Second, get the right legal structure. Work with an attorney who understands trusts, estates, taxes, and privacy. Third, do not quit being useful. You may leave a bad job, but keep purpose, work, rhythm, and responsibility in your life. Fourth, clean up destructive debt. Treat high-interest debt as an emergency, not as a detail. Fifth, set boundaries with friends and family. Do not become a private bank. If you help, give with clarity and limits. Sixth, preserve the principle. Live from what the money produces, not from the capital itself. Build a diversified system that can produce income, growth, liquidity, and resilience across different environments. That is the map. But there is one more layer. Sudden wealth also changes your internal world. You may feel guilt. You may feel fear. You may feel pressure to prove you deserve it. You may feel a desire to reward your past self for all the years of struggle. You may feel that if you do not spend now, you are wasting the opportunity. You may feel that saying no to people makes you selfish. These feelings are normal. They are also dangerous if they make decisions for you. A principle-based life means you listen to emotions, but you do not let them drive the car. If guilt says, give everyone money, your principles should ask, will this help them or weaken them? If fear says, keep everything in cash, your principles should ask, what will inflation do over time? If excitement says, buy the house today, your principles should ask, what are the carrying costs, taxes, insurance, and long-term obligations? If ego says, show them you made it, your principles should ask, why do I need their approval? If boredom says, start a business you know nothing about, your principles should ask, do I have competence, edge, and a real plan? This is how you protect yourself from yourself. Most financial disasters do not begin with bad math. They begin with bad psychology. The math simply records the consequences. That is why I believe the greatest asset after sudden wealth is not the money. It is self-control. If you can slow down when everyone expects you to speed up, you have an advantage. If you can stay private when your ego wants attention, you have an advantage. If you can say no when people use guilt, you have an advantage. If you can keep working on something meaningful when you no longer need a paycheck, you have an advantage. If you can spend only the fruit and protect the tree, you have an advantage. And if you can turn a windfall into a machine that produces freedom, then the money has served its purpose. The irony is that sudden wealth feels like the end of the struggle, but in many ways it is the beginning of a new test. The test was how to earn. Now the test is how to govern. You become the steward of a system. If you govern it well, it can support you, your family, and perhaps even future generations. If you govern it poorly, it can disappear faster than you imagined. That is why I would not rush. I would not tell everyone. I would not make promises. I would not buy the lifestyle first. I would not lend money casually. I would not assume I had become smarter just because I had become richer. I would pause. I would build the structure. I would think in terms of systems, incentives, risks, and second-order consequences. I would ask, what will this decision cause next? That question is powerful. If I tell people, what will that cause next? If I buy this house, what will that cause next? If I fund this relative, what will that cause next? If I quit all work, what will that cause next? If I keep the principal invested, what will that cause next? If I ignore taxes, what will that cause next? Most people only see the first-order effect. The car feels good, the house feels good, the gift feels generous, the announcement feels exciting. But the second-order effects are where wealth is either protected or destroyed. The car brings depreciation, insurance, attention, and lifestyle inflation. The house brings taxes, maintenance, staff, and fixed obligations. The gift brings future requests. The announcement brings predators. The lack of work brings boredom. The lack of structure brings chaos. This is why I care so much about principles. Principles are tools for seeing beyond the first emotional impulse. So if you suddenly become rich, do not ask, what can I buy? Ask, what system do I need to become the kind of person who can keep this? That is the real question, because if you cannot keep it, the money was never truly yours. It was only passing through. And if you can keep it, grow it, protect it, and use it to buy time, then it becomes something much more valuable than a number. It becomes freedom. Freedom from jobs that drain you, freedom from debt that owns you, freedom from saying yes when you need to say no, freedom from making choices only because of fear, freedom to spend time with the people who matter, freedom to do work that is meaningful instead of work that is merely necessary, freedom to be quiet, freedom to be secure, freedom to build a legacy. That is what staying rich really means. It is not about showing the world that you have money. It is about building a life where you no longer need the world to know.